Hello, I wanted to take a few minutes to help you understand how to work this Module 3 short paper. It's worth quite a lot of your grade. And remember, Project Draft 1, A is worth a lot of points, it's worth 115. Also, Part 2 is worth 115. And both of those are part of your final project, worth 250 points in this class. So it's incredibly important that you get this assignment right. I will be here to help you as you draft along, but I want you to kind of understand, 'cause it's a little bit confusing how to get around. So if you look at it in week 2, we got this look ahead to the Module 3 short paper, and it said something that sounds pretty easy. Choose one of the 3 scenarios in the scenario profile, which we linked to. That makes sense. Then write your draft in the project template document. We also give you that document to fill in. And then it says, remember to keep in mind your chosen scenario when writing your responses to the prompts in the draft assignment. That sounds really easy. But as it's set up, the way it's set up is a little bit more confusing. So I want to make sure that I can help you guide through this. I have given the instructions here in writing for anyone who wants that, but I just kind of want you to go through what I'm talking about. So right here, short paper project draft 1, this is where you will actually be posting your assignment. Mine looks a little bit different than you, I do understand. Remember, always look at the rubric, but let's actually start taking a look at this is where you submit your assignment, but first you have to review the guidelines. So here, before you start even thinking of submitting anything, go to the guidelines and rubric. And this takes you on to another page, which links you to all the content you're going to need, or at least links to the content you're going to need in order to complete that assignment. So right here, this links you to the guidelines for it. Here we say this is looking at how we're taking sustainability and those 3 pillars. Remember, we're looking at business, environment, and people, and how to incorporate all 3 pillars into your project. So I want you to see how each of these are important in actually solving the issue that's described here. So what you want to do is we're going to look at the rubric, and we'll look at that in a second, but you also want to choose a scenario, and I'll show you those in a minute. Each one of the scenarios gives you some information about it, and it links to other resources you will need in order to complete that scenario correctly. So when you scroll down here, you can see we're looking at this week, looking at the interconnectedness of environmental issues and human behavior as it relates to your chosen scenario. So you have to look at both the environmental systems in the community and how it impacts the environmental system. So we're looking at people and environment at this point. We're not looking at business quite yet. So we're also going to be looking at how the group's bias addresses these things. For this week, you're going to have these questions. You're going to describe an environmental system in your scenario and how it impacts human behavior, how the impact of the current resource is used on the environment. Here's some prompts to help you think along. Describe how human ideology impacts behavior in the environmental systems, and look at the role of cultural bias. So those are the 4 big questions you're going to be answering for part 4. But if you look here and we look at what to submit, this is where it gets a little confusing. You're going to have to fill in this project template, which I'm going to open again in another window so that you can actually take a look at that. Excuse me, I've got 1,000 other things opening all at once. Sorry about that. Let's close that. And so what we see is this is your project template. Part 1 right here is those questions I just asked you to answer. So you'll have to describe these, how environmental systems, the impact, behavior, and role of cultural biases. Look at those words in bold. Part 2, profile, and part 3, the profile and your actionable steps, that's going to be your rough draft part 2. Together, all 3 of these are going to be your entire project. But obviously, it's kind of hard to answer these questions unless you've actually looked at the profiles. So this is the template you can fill out. Just insert your text right here and make sure you delete that says, note, delete this before you submit your paper. So right here where it says insert text, that's where you're going to be answering your questions. Answer it right here in the project template. I'm not going to suggest that you try to write this whole thing as one big long story or one long narrative, because often when people do that, they miss answering these questions. So answer each one of these questions in order. Now that you're sitting going, okay, I've got my project template, but what are these profiles you keep talking about? And this is why it's a little confusing, because the profiles are underneath it. So those are the questions you're going to have to answer, but this is the material you're going to need in order to answer it. So these are your scenario profiles and your project guidelines and rubrics. You want to make sure you click on this before you start writing anything, or you're not going to know what to even write about. You're going to get very confused. So these are 3 different choices of profiles that you have to select. You can pick any one of these 3, but you're going to stick with it for the entire project. So this one is the scenario 1, which looks at from a business perspective, looks at this mining company. Now I want you to see right here, that's the mining company. But in order to really answer all these questions carefully, you're also going to have to click on these 2 articles and read those. This second article, the link has been getting a little twitchy. If that link doesn't work, please go to the announcements and you'll find that I've reposted a better link because that one link doesn't always work. So you can choose the mining company as your profile that you want to look at, looking at a business perspective. Now, remember, when we look at sustainability, we look at all 3 facets of sustainability. So while you're looking at it from a business angle, you're also going to have to make sure that you incorporate the human aspect of equity or people as well as the environmental aspect. So all 3 of those pillars are going to be required, but you're looking at it from the point of a business person and then incorporating those other principles. The second scenario looks at the principles of social justice. And again, having to incorporate how to make that work with business and the environment as well, but looking at it from that social perspective. Now, this talks about an organization, Elm Glen Residential Organization, and the problems they're having. And what they use as their evidence is these different case studies. So this should be about the Elm Glen organization and looking at what happened in Flint, Michigan as a background. So again, this is very important extra articles to read, but realize that the main thing you're talking about is what's in the profile, and you're using that as backup information in order to support what you're saying. Our third object, or third one, is environmental quality. And this is looking at environmental quality first and then looking at it from social perspective. This one's a little bit more of, you're going to have to delve into where that social perspective is. It's not quite as obvious, but I think you can still do it. And this is the additional investigation. Again, the case that you were talking about is the local college environmental quality club, and we're using this case study from a different organization in order to understand that a little bit better. So once you've read all these profiles and once you've read those additional resources, choose one profile and choose one additional resource. Then you can go back to that main document and start taking a look at how that applies to the questions that are asked right here. Again, for part 1, you're going to have to answer sustainable practices, these 4 questions. For your second draft, week 5, you're going to have to answer part 2 and part 3 for that rough draft. And then for your final project, you're going to be taking everything you wrote here and incorporating the comments that I've made in Gradebook in order to improve that, in order to submit your final project with all of those answers. I hope this really helps you understand how to do this a little bit better. I hope it helps you understand how to make sure you have success in this project. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And always, always, always remember to look at the rubric, which is right here, which basically shows you with sustainable practices, you need to answer that question. That's for 22 points, 22.5. The impact, 22.5, behavior, 22.5, role of cultural biases, and then clear communication. Please make sure you answer all those questions. If you skip one, then the only thing I can do is give you a 0. If you write it and you're not quite certain what you're writing, I can still give you lots of points. So keep that in mind when you're writing your paper. I do hope that this really helped you, and please reach out if this didn't make it clear enough, because I can revise my instructions to make it easier, because I really want you to succeed in this course. Thank you and have a great day.